Alright, our goal for today is to be able to solve rational equations. It's a little bit tricky and there's a few different ways you can do them. So I'm going to throw a whole bunch of information at you today and then you're going to have to practice them and see if you can get it. Okay, it's not super hard. There's just a bunch of different methods. Okay, first one I'm going to show you is cross multiplying. You've actually been doing this one since like middle school. And so this first one I'll give you as a really easy example, then we'll do a slightly harder one. Okay, so we got 3/8 equals x over 24. In middle school you probably circled these things. So it's 8 times x equals 3 times 24. And then we want to solve for x, so I'm just going to divide both sides by 8. Okay, you could just type this in the calculator, or you can also realize that 8 goes into 24 3 times, and 3 times 3 is 9. 9 divided by 1 is still 9. So there's our answer for that one. We should check it to make sure it's right. So let's see. 3/8 equals 9 over 24. Well, we can simplify this a little bit because 3 goes into 9 and 24. So if we divide each of those by 3, we get 3/8. So our answer is correct for that one. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. It's just a little bit more complicated. So 9 times x plus 1 equals 3 times 4x plus 5. And then we need to distribute. So 9 times x is 9x. 9 times 1 is plus 9. Same thing here. 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times 5 is 15. And then we have algebra 1 equation with variables on both sides. So I want to put all the x's on this side. So I get 9 equals 12x minus 3x plus 15. I need to move the 15 over. So I get, let's see, that's negative 6 equals 3 times x. Divide by 3 and you get x equals negative 2. So a lot of steps there, but nothing super tricky. We should check just to make sure. So I'm going to plug negative 2 into the original equation. So 3 over negative 2 plus 1 equals 9 over 4 times negative 2 plus 5. Let's see, this is negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3. And this one simplifies to 3 over negative 1. So we are correct. Okay? Those are the first ones. Those are the easiest ones. Let's look at another way to solve some. Alright, this first one I'm going to show you two different ways to do it actually. One is, notice we have x on the bottom of a couple of these and 4 on the bottom of the other one. So I'm going to move everything that has an x in the denominator on one side and everything with the 4 in the denominator on the other side, and then we can cross multiply. So I'm going to get rid of this minus 7/4. Let's see, negative 9 over x minus 7 over 4. And then I'm going to move this to the other side. So I got, let's see, 5 plus 9 is 14 over x equals negative 7/4. Okay, now it's just like the last one. I'm going to put the negative with the 7. You can put it with the 4, you can put it wherever you want. And then we're going to cross multiply, so I got negative 7 times x equals 14 times 4. And then I need to divide by negative 7. So I get, let's see, 14 over negative 7 is the same as 2 over negative 1. So that's negative 8. Okay, that's one way to solve it. That works great if you only have two different denominators. Okay, I will show you the other way. And the other way you can do these is just find the, basically we're going to multiply everything by our least common denominator. So we have x's and we have 4's in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4 times x. Okay, on this first one, the x's cancel out. X divided by x would be 1. so all we have is 5 times 4. On the second one, the 4's cancel out, so we have 7 times x. And on the third one here, the x's cancel out again, so we have negative 9 times 4. Okay? Now we want to get everything on one side of the equal sign except for the x. So I'm going to do minus 20. See, negative 36 minus 20 is negative 56. And then if I divide by 7, I get negative 8, which is the exact same answer that we just got. Okay? So that's two different ways to do it. Let's try this one here, number 4. Okay? This one, we have 3 different denominators here. We have, this is basically 1 over 1. This is a x minus 5, and this is a x. So we can't do like the first way we did it here. We're going to have to multiply by the least common factor. So I'm going to multiply everything by x minus 5 times x. We could also multiply by 1, but that doesn't do anything. So this one, the denominator doesn't cancel anything. So this whole first term is x minus 5 times x times 1, but the 1 doesn't do anything. On the second one, the x minus 5's cancel out, so I have negative 8 times x. And then over here, the x's cancel out, so I have 3 times x minus 5. Okay, that's the tricky part. That's a little bit confusing. So you're just going to have to multiply by the least common denominator. Okay, sometimes you might get something, well, we'll look at the next example. The next example is a little different. But you can always just multiply by all the denominators if you can't find the least common. Okay, let's multiply this. Let's see, x times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. And then we got minus 8x. And then over here we distribute, we get 3x minus 15. This looks like a quadratic. So we want to get everything on one side of the equal sign and hopefully it'll factor. Let's see, that's negative 13x. And then I'm going to do minus 3x from each side. And I'm also going to do plus 15. I'm going to do them at the same time, so hopefully you're okay with that. Over here, we just have 0 left. I got x squared. Negative 13x minus 3x is negative 16x. And then plus 15. And then we got to try and factor this. So we need two numbers that multiply to make 15 and add to make negative 16. So I think it's going to be minus 15 and minus 1. Negative 15 times negative 1 is positive 15. Negative 15 plus negative 1 is negative 16. And then if I solve each equation, I get x equals 15. And then plus 1, x equals 1. So those are my two answers. Okay? Let's look at one more, even trickier one. Alright, this one looks super tricky because we have 3 different denominators. So what we could do is multiply everything by x minus 3 times x squared minus 9 times x plus 3. That would work, but it would get really big and gross, okay? So instead, I'm going to see if we can find a smaller denominator. I think we can factor this part. Okay, so if we, this is a difference of squares, so I can factor that actually into x minus 3 times x plus 3. Remember, anytime you get x squared minus just a number, see if you can find the square root of that number. And then I'm going to change this to a plus negative 4x. Means the exact same thing, and it lets us have a plus in there. Okay, so now if we look at this, the biggest common factor actually is just this. Okay, because this is missing the x minus 3, this is missing the x plus 3. So if we multiply everything by x minus 3 times x plus 3, we're going to cancel out all the denominators. That's the idea, is to get rid of fractions so that we can just solve it regular. Okay, so here the x minus 3's cancel out, so I have 6 times x plus 3. Here, both of those cancel out, so all I have left is the 8x squared on the top. And then here the x plus 3's cancel, so I have plus negative 4x times x minus 3. Okay, we got rid of the fractions, which is nice. Now let's see what we can do to simplify this a little bit. I'm going to distribute here, so I get 6x plus 18 equals 8x squared. Negative 4x times x is negative 4x squared. Negative 4x times negative 3 is plus 12x. Okay, let's see if we can simplify some. Let's see, 6x plus 18. 8x squared minus 4x squared is 4x squared plus 12x. And then I want to get everything on one side of the equal sign. Since the x squared is here, I'm going to move everything over there. So minus 6x and minus 18. So I get 0. 4x squared. See, 12 minus 6 is plus 6x minus 18. We can simplify this a little bit because 2 goes into everything. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. And I get 0 equals 2x squared plus 3x minus 9. There's a couple ways to do this one. You could use the quadratic formula. If you're really good at factoring, you might be able to use math magic to factor this. So it's going to be, see, I multiplied there. So I get x plus 6 times x minus 3. And then since I divided by 2, I get 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then remember, if you can't simplify, the 2 goes in the front. Okay, if you didn't get that, use the quadratic formula. Okay, once you get it factored though, this one, x plus 3 equals 0. If I do minus 3 from each side, I get that. Same thing here. I'm going to do plus 3 on each side, and then I'll divide by 2, and those are my 2 answers. Okay? Anybody see anything wrong with those answers? No? Nothing? Here's one thing I'm noticing. What if you think back to excluded values, remember the easiest way to find excluded values is when you get everything factored. So our excluded values on this one, we know that x can't equal positive 3 because that would make this denominator equal 0. And we know that x can't equal negative 3 because that would make this denominator equal 0. Well, when we solved it, we got x equals negative 3 right there. So that one is actually an excluded value. So our only real answer is the 3/2. Okay. You could also, if you forget about the excluded values, you should check your answer first. So if you plug these two numbers into the original equation, when you got to here, you would get negative 12 over 0. And then hopefully you would go, uh-oh, I can't have 0 on the bottom. Okay? So that's it for solving. A little tricky. This one's a lot harder than the ones you'll probably get. Okay? So make sure you can do cross multiplying, and then make sure you get the multiplying by the least common factor, or least common denominator. Okay, let's look real quick at inverses, which is pretty much the same thing. Alright, last thing for this week is finding the inverse of a rational function. Remember, when you find an inverse, there's always 2 steps. Swap the x and the y, solve the new one for y. Okay, so there's sort of one trick with rational expressions, but other than that, they're pretty easy. Okay, so first I'm going to switch the x and the y. Okay, and this is where the trick comes in. What we're really doing here is cross multiplying, but the sort of shortcut is, since the y is on the bottom, we're just going to flip this one over and put the y on the top. And if we flip over this side of the equal sign, that means we also have to flip over this side. So instead of x, it's going to be 1 over x. Okay, now we can solve for y. So first we need to multiply both sides by 2. This would be 2 times 1 is 2, so 2 over x. And then if I want to get rid of plus 3, I'm going to do minus 3. So I get 2 over x minus 3 equals y. So that is the inverse of our original function. Okay, so switch x and y, solve the new one for y, and really the only trick is if you get y on the bottom, you flip it over on both sides. Okay, let's try this one. Remember, f of x is the same thing as y, so the first step is to switch x and y. Instead of y, I'm going to make that an x, and then we got 50y plus 1,000 divided by y. It's kind of a tricky one, actually. I need to get rid of this y from the bottom, so I'm going to multiply both sides by y. Those cancel, so I get x times y equals 50y plus 1,000. And then we need to get all the y's on one side of the equal sign. So I'm going to do minus 50y. I get xy minus 50y equals 1,000. And then since these both have y in them, I'm going to factor the y out. If I take the y out of this, I have x. If I take the y out of that, I have minus 50. And then since this is y times that whole thing, I'm going to divide by x minus 50. Oops. And I get y equals 1,000 over x minus 50. There's our inverse of that original function. Okay, so just like all inverses, switch the x and the y, solve the new equation for y. And just like the other couple problems ago, this one is probably harder than the ones you're going to get. Okay, that's it. I know it's a bunch of stuff, so it's really important that you actually do the practice problems. I'll give you, okay, there's not that many of them. It's I don't know, let's see, looks like 9 problems. That's not that many. Okay, so try those 9 problems. When you're done, let me know, and I'll give you the comprehension check. I'm going to try to, if I can figure it out, do a Google form for your comprehension check, and that way you won't have to email me to get it. You can just take it when you're ready, and it will hopefully grade it sort of by itself. So that's all I have for this week. Hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you next week.